On a mission to destroy all shrines they view as un-Islamic. Members of the Islamist group Ansar Dine reportedly began attacking historic tombs in Timbuktu Saturday. The ancient trading city is known for its distinctive architecture, made from mud and wood. It's also home to 19 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Many are now being targeted, deemed idolatry by Ansar Dine.
They assimilate everything like, building tombs or going to tombs. For them, it is akin to idol worshipping. So somehow it was part of their program to destroy these shrines.
The armed militants launched their onslaught just 2 days after UNESCO named the city an endangered World Heritage Site because of unrest in the area. Ansar Dine and separatist Tuaregs seized power in the northern half of Mali, following the power vacuum left by the country's March 22nd coup. But with the Islamist group gaining the upper hand, more sites of historic and cultural value are under threat.
You're listening to American Edition on The Voice of Russia. I'm Rob Sachs. Islamist militants destroyed 2 tombs today at a renowned 14th century mosque in Timbuktu today. The mosque is classified by UNESCO as being a World Heritage Site. The new destruction comes after attacks last week on other historic and religious landmarks in the historic city by Islamists of the Ansar Dine group, who claim that the century-old shrines of the local Sufi version of Islam are idolatrous. With more details, we turn now to Pauline Bax of Bloomberg News. Welcome, Pauline.
Thank you.
So tell us more about what's going on in Timbuktu. Who is this Islamist group creating all this destruction?
Well, the Islamist group Ansar Dine seized the town of Timbuktu a couple of weeks ago. They'd come to the town in the wake of a Tuareg rebellion. Tuareg are people who are ethnic to Mali, and they declared an independent state in the north of Mali. And Ansar Dine, whom nobody had ever heard of a couple of months ago, has now completely seized several towns in the north. And Ansar Dine stands for Defenders of the Faith. So they are a very strict Islamist group, which is probably headed by a Tuareg leader who has spent some time in Saudi Arabia and came back to Mali with high ambitions.
And Mali has been in upheaval since President Touré was overthrown in March, just weeks before scheduled elections. What is the current situation there in Mali? Is it anarchy? What's going on?
Yes, it's very chaotic. Actually, when you go to the capital, Bamako, one wouldn't really notice because life sort of goes on as usual, but the government is not capable of managing the situation. After the overthrow of the president, a temporary government, as it's called, a transition government, has taken over, but they don't seem capable of finding a solution for the seizure, for those rebel groups in the north, and they're not really capable of setting up a solid authority and, like I said, find a solution. So in the capital, life goes on among the residents as usual, but there's no really any strategy to go forward. And the solution seems to have to come from ECOWAS, which is a regional political and economic organization that is trying to find a way forward to the current crisis.
What is the connection between the destruction in Mali and the collapse in Libya?
Well, after the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi, a lot of fighters, especially Tuareg fighters who had been in the army in Libya, seized weapons from weapon stops in Libya and came back to the desert. Also to Niger, which is neighboring to Mali, but some of them had to depose their weapons before they could enter the country. Mali was a slightly different situation. They came with their weapons to the border area, which is a very remote and very inaccessible desert zone, and basically started their rebellion almost right away. And they are very strong. They have very strong weapons. And the Malian army was heavily under-equipped. They weren't able to deal with the situation. And that is one of the reasons that the soldiers ended up overthrowing the president, because they were unhappy with the means they were given to fight off this rebellion.
So let's go back to Timbuktu and these historic sites that are being attacked. These are both versions of Islam, and Timbuktu is noted as one of the birthplaces of Islam. Why are these sites then viewed as, heretical sites, or, why are they under attack?
Yes, it seems very paradoxical. It doesn't really make sense on the face of things. But Mali is known for having a very tolerant strain of Islam, which is Sufi Islam. So it's possible to have shrines, and people have a very liberal interpretation of how they exercise, their religion. The Ansar Dine group, and there's also some other Islamist group, are basically Islamists from the Wahhabi sect, which is very powerful in Saudi Arabia. And like I said, the leader of Ansar Dine has spent time in Saudi Arabia. So that's a much more stricter version of Islam, which doesn't allow for shrines or tombs or anything that they can see as worshipping saints. It's absolutely not allowed. So it's really, it's a new form of Islam that has come to Mali, and which, local residents find very hard to deal with.
And what can be done to protect these historic sites? I mean, this is a World Heritage Site. Muslims all over the world think about the roots of Islam being rooted in Timbuktu, and it's not just affecting those in Mali, but I'd imagine the larger Muslim population.
Yes, the International Criminal Court in The Hague has even called it a potential war crime. It's a very grave situation. There's been loads of statements from the UNESCO. There was a statement from UNICEF today about the situation of children over there. Basically, like I said, the government of Mali is really not capable of finding a solution, and the question remains if they have the money to fight these heavily armed people. The solution may come from the regional group ECOWAS, which I mentioned before. They have called for a military intervention, and that would mean that regional troops from other West African countries would be sent to Mali and fight off these Islamists. The fact of the matter is, however, that the UN Security Council is not very keen on approving a military intervention just now. So at the moment, things are as they are, and it's possible that all the shrines will be destroyed. This is what Ansar Dine has vowed to do. So I think by the time the solution is found, it's probably too late.
When we talk about the sites being destroyed, are there any documents that can be protected, or is there anything that can be done? I know the mosques obviously can't be moved, but what about all these manuscripts? Has there been any move to find a way to make sure that they are being kept in some safe place?
It's possible if humanitarian groups or aid groups would be allowed into Timbuktu to safeguard those documents. But, local residents are really unhappy with what's happening, and they've tried to stop some of the destruction. But they are not, they are facing armed men. There's really not much they can do. And there's also fear that was expressed by UNESCO earlier in the week that those manuscripts are very valuable and extremely old will be smuggled out of the country and sold or, sent somewhere else. So as it is now, there's no clear-cut solution for the situation, and lots of very valuable documents and shrines could be completely obliterated.
Do we see the destruction going on in Timbuktu as something that could lead to a larger civil war of sorts in Mali? I mean, you have these Sufis who have been there practicing their one religion, and this other sect of Islam coming in and causing destruction. Is it having a destabilizing effect on the country as a whole?
Yes, well, the country is already enormously destabilized. What's interesting is that Ansar Dine is not the only rebel group in the area. There are several other rebel groups, one that calls itself the Movement for Unity and Jihad in West Africa. These groups seem to collaborate, but there's also been clashes, also with the Tuareg insurgents who first seized the territory. So these groups have been fighting amongst each other for control over the territory. And it remains to be seen, it still remains to be seen if over the course of the next few weeks or months, these groups will be able to collaborate and stick together. So there's also, reason to think that they might actually fall out and start fighting amongst each other then you could probably speak of a small-scale civil war.
We talked earlier about the weapons flowing from Libya and Tunisia, but what about funding for these groups? How are they able to support these militants who are coming in and destroying these sites?
Well, Ansar Dine, and that's the thing, it was very unknown until recently, so it's really not clear where this group gets its money. There was talk for the past few years of another group, which is Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, or AQIM, which has been active in northern Mali for several years now, and they were known for kidnapping foreigners. And they made millions of dollars with ransom money that they got for those foreigners once they were released. So this is a very wealthy group, but they haven't been reported to be militarily active on the ground. But Akin is also there. So it's really not clear where Ansar Dine gets his money from, but it's very obvious that they have a lot of weapons.
We talked also about the UN Security Council being loath to put up a fighting force to come in and help protect Timbuktu. But what has the West said they can do other than condemn the actions? Is there any support they can give to locals there? Is there anything that they've talked about doing apart from putting troops on the ground?
Well, the government in Bamako is very poor now because a lot of revenues that used to come in from, for example, tourism and exports of gold have dropped since the trouble began. So the government doesn't have a lot of means at the moment. And the territory that is seized by these rebels is difficult to access, and especially for foreign diplomats or for foreign aid workers, they can't really go there for fear of being kidnapped or for fear of being killed. There's been a lot of regional talks, including with Algeria. Algeria had several of its diplomats kidnapped by one of these rebel groups a couple of months ago. And some countries in the region say that Algeria should help find a military solution for the problem because these rebel groups touch the border with Algeria. But all in all, it's really not clear what should happen, although there seems to be regionally an agreement that military intervention is the only solution.
You talked about this group, Ansar. Is it Ansar Dine? Ansar Dine. Ansar Dine. Saying they will keep destroying these shrines and these sites until all of it is wiped out. Is there any sense of how soon that could happen, or how quickly we could see this current situation in Timbuktu be resolved?
Well, there are about 16 mausoleums and shrines, and there's 3 or 4 very important mosques. Now, it's likely that the mosques in itself will be spared. It's just that the entrance to some of the shrines who are adjacent to the mosque have been destroyed. So even if all the shrines will be destroyed, the mosques will probably survive. At least that's the hope of the residents there. But apart from that, this group can go destroying whatever it wants because many of the local population have fled, and those that remain are too poor to leave. So there's really nothing they can do, except protest what they see happening. There is an Islamic council in the capital who has also condemned these actions and urged the group to stop this destruction, but they haven't listened so far.
Pauline Bax is a reporter with Bloomberg News. She joined us from Mali. Pauline, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.